What happened at Grenfell doesn't just sit in social housing. What happened at Grenfell tells us the type of society we're living in today and the contempt that they have for particular people. And how when they all come together, whether it be the local authority, the government, housing, health, all the other things, adult social care, when they all fit together, they come from a place of, at best, indifference, at worst they just don't care or value human lives and how they treat others. And at Grenfell we see the worst of that, where we see 72 men, women and children lose their lives in the most horrific circumstances. I was called to Grenfell on the night of the 14th of June, and it's something that will stay with me forever, horribly. I always remember that day. It was a sunny afternoon. I had an evening in the garden with some friends. A girlfriend had called me during the evening and I'd said to her, call me later, because I was busy. She called me about 1:15 in the morning on my mobile phone, and I ignored it. Because I just thought, I told you I was going to chat to you later. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I've got time to gossip at 1 o'clock in the morning. Luckily, that friend had my landline. Now, nobody rings my landline, apart from people in the Caribbean. So I thought it was an emergency. And that's why I answered it. And she said to me, Moroccan Tower is on fire, because that's how Grenfell was known locally. And I'm going to go into the history of how Grenfell Tower got there. She said, I've been evacuated. Can you come and pick me up? We were there till 8 o'clock in the morning, watching the tower burn. We could see people at the windows. We were screaming for people to come out. I left at 8 o'clock in the morning. And at that point, nobody turned up. No statutory agency turned up. In fact, the only people I saw on that night were 4 Muslim young men. It was Ramadan. They were on their way to mosque. And on their way back from the mosque, they brought water for all of those who were standing there as horrified observers. So, what we know about those that lost their lives in Grenfell, of the 72, 7 were British, Irish and white heritage. 32 were from the Middle East or North Africa. 9 were from East Africa. 5 were from West Africa. 5 were Bangladeshi heritage. 3 from the Caribbean. 1 from the Philippines. And 1 from Colombia. But the Grenfell Inquiry has told us they're not including race or class in their terms of reference, because they don't see that as an issue. If systemic racism is not involved in the story of Grenfell, then history will be written wrong. And we need to make sure that's recorded, because the fire didn't happen in a vacuum. So let's see what's happening on the lead up to the fire. So Grenfell is in one of the richest boroughs in the UK. But there's a north and a south divide in the borough. And that's the only reason why Grenfell was covered in lethal cladding. It wasn't refurbishment to benefit the residents that live there. It was solely to make it aesthetically pleasing for those in the south who saw the tower as an eyesore, and those on their way to the new Westfield shopping centre, so that they, passing on the train, didn't feel like they were going into the ghetto. The history of Notting Hill, where Grenfell stands, is fraught with social unrest and class wars going back decades, from the Notting Hill riots in the 50s. There was a large Caribbean community. We see that now. We have a carnival every year where we invite millions of people in to come and have a good time. And that all comes out of race there. Locally, people had to live in what was classed as slums, really, because post-war, when those communities, the Commonwealth or the common poor communities, were invited to come and rebuild Britain, we were actually entitled to social housing. So we had to rent properties, rooms in properties, with really some terrible landlords. The most famous of one was Rackman, who operated in Notting Hill. The Lancaster West Estate, where Grenfell stands, was built as a result of slum clearance, and it was to make way for what is now known as the A14, or we call it the Westway. And that's why people then moved on to this new estate. We know now that if the refurbishment of Grenfell Tower hadn't happened, and it had stood as it was in 1972 when it was opened, that fire would never have happened, it would never have spread. We had local things happening over a series of times, so we had, just before Grenfell, we had this removal of community assets. A local library was being shut down, the local further education college was being shut down, we had a local nursery that was everybody's favourite, that was shut down. So we're removing assets from us. People on the estate needed, actually, Grenfell was originally marked for demolition. That's the poor condition that it was in. People have known about, the flats being cold in the winter, the bathrooms and the kitchens had never been refurbished. They in the end got some money and decided to do what we called a quick job on it. They gave the contract to one of their mates. We know this from the inquiry. So actually, they told one of their mates to downbid their offer, and they just gave it to them because they had worked with them before on the school, the academy that sits next to Grenfell. They cost cut on the refurbishments, and they used austerity as the reason to not spend as much as they did. But we know now that our council had £273 million sitting down in its reserves. On the day of the fire, the media was there, possibly before most of the fire engines got there. And by the morning, when we read the headlines, there seemed to be some suggestion that it might be a terrorist attack. Secondly, we heard about undocumented migrants, subletting, and benefit scroungers. That's not the people that we knew lived in the town. In fact, most people don't know that 14 of the households in the town, they were leaseholders. They bought their properties. We see government, and that's the other key thing. We are still under the control of the same council that allowed Grenfell to happen. They are still there. And you think to yourself, where else would that happen? Where else would the person who you think murdered 72 of your neighbours still be left in charge of people? We expected them to put on special measures. That's never happened. The truth is that we face social inequality and racism every day of our lives. You're treated differently if your skin is a different colour. And as I've said, if the inquiry does not take into consideration questions about institutional racism and the role that it played in the first place, then they will never listen. Someone said earlier about the complaints of the resident. And this is where voicelessness can really be seen, where we're rendered voiceless. They make complaints about the refurbishment. Some of them were threatened with eviction. They didn't allow those repairs to happen. Until we get to the blog in the November before the fire, 6 months before the fire, where they predict something terrible and catastrophic is going to happen here before people sit up and take notice. The borough spent 10 million on the regeneration project. Rather than catering to the needs of those who lived in the town, they actually catered to the white, wealthy, south-dwelling people in the borough. So for us it was clear who had the power there, and power is a huge thing when it comes to your home. So it's a part of a larger structural inequality, and in housing in particular, where we know that you are more likely as a, and I'm going to change the discourse here a little bit as well, because I don't like the word minority. I'm actually part of a black and majority global community. So I'm going to define me and not be confined by other people's labels. 2017 to 2018, the English Housing Survey says that 40% of those people living in high-rise buildings in the social rented sector are black, Asian or other. But we only make up 40% of the population. So how do they get there? There has to be an explanation as to why they get there. Don't get me wrong, there's loads of poor white working class people too. But studies have shown that whilst 20% of white people are on a low income, the number always increases for black people. So wherever there are disastrous circumstances for white working class people, disproportionately, black and global majority people will always be worse off. And so it makes sense that actually if you make it better for us, you make it better for all. So that's always a starting point. There are also parallel themes for me with the things that have happened afterwards in society. So the killing of George Floyd, the disproportionate number of deaths under COVID, the pandemic, race and the obligation of the state are at the heart of all those cases. I always say we've moved from a welfare state to a careless state, and that more and more we put our public services into private hands where money is the ultimate object. Our lives get worse. We suffer disproportionately. And in Grenfell, people pay the ultimate price with their lives. During the inquiry, society was called to acknowledge They refused to do that. We had the private companies who had made huge profits, who had tampered with the fire safety certificates, so knew that the cladding was dangerous, but didn't care. We had those with the installation, which was flammable as well. They were given immunity by Suella Braverman, who was the Attorney General at the time, to be immune from prosecution from the evidence that they gave to the inquiry. Laura showed you earlier, not one black or global majority person gave evidence from one of those companies or from government to the inquiry. One of the missing group of people who they had an interview are the actual workers. And we might begin to think about what they might look like. And if they could cost cut on Grenfell, were they cost cutting on paying the construction workers that worked on that building, who probably knew that they were working with illegal stuff? What voices are missing? That's always a question to ask. Society has been called to acknowledge racism and prejudices like never before at the moment. We've had Bill Q and the adultification of our young children at school. We've had toddler A who dies from mum. We've got the Labour Party sitting on a board inquiry. The Met Police. I mean, how much more needs to happen with the Met Police before somebody says it really is a problem? And we've just found out that the London Fire Brigade is institutionally racist as well. Unless somebody goes down the road with Ngozi at the palace who's asked where she really comes from. When we try and talk about racism, and we keep raising our voices, we're shut down with either an apology, really sorry, didn't mean to offend you, or there's a denial that it's really happening. And it's those of us that are impacted that have to continue to fight, and it's wearing. The scale of the tragedy is yet unknown, but it looks to be utterly incomprehensible and heartbreaking. We can only grieve for those that are with us. But if we don't make those demands now, and you know what Grenfell is in the post. I wanted to end on inquiries, public inquiries. Because that's also systematically discriminative as well. The government decides who gets a public inquiry. So I've got my northern brothers and sisters in Yorkshire, in the mining communities. In 1984, the police drove their horses through their pipeline. Never had any inquiry. Been begging for it. Never had one. So the government decides who gets an inquiry. The government then appoints the judge. The judge normally is white, upper class, male. Because we're not represented in the judiciary. The government then decides what the terms of reference are going to be and what they look at. We pay for it. They cost a lot of money. We have spent millions on legal representation at the inquiry. It's become almost illegal, a lawyer's banquet. But at the end of the day, there is no legal obligation by the government to take on board any of the recommendations of the finding. So it's government marking its own homework. Do they really work for us? Why can't we think about having community inquiry? Where you hear our voices and we tell you what we want you to look at, rather than what you're doing for us all the time, and making us out to be an ungrateful bunch of people. I'm going to end with a quote from James Baldwin, and it really is about voicelessness. Who you talk to, who you listen to, and how you learn and move on. Love James Baldwin. He says, if one really wishes to know how justice is administered in a country, one doesn't question the police, the lawyers, the judges, and all the protected members of the middle class. One goes to those precisely who needs the law's protection the most, and you listen to their testimony. Ask anyone, or any poor person, ask the wretched how they fare in the halls of justice, and then you will know whether or not the country is just, whether or not it has a love for justice, or any concept of it. They never ask us. They rarely ask us. And if you're not listening to those voices, or those voices do not have a place at your table, you will never know. It's never really about money. It's never really about lack of homes, bureaucracy, people getting around regulations. It's simply about the political will to do something about it, to look after the people that it's supposed to care for, whether they look like you or not. I said this the last time, I'm not going to be silent, because our voice is the key to the future. We have to keep on fighting, we have to make sure our voices are heard. But don't get in this fight if you're not fighting to win. If you're not fighting to change things, don't be a part of it. And I think that's where I'm going to leave you today. Someone has to listen, but we all need to do it. And together, we can make this country. We shouldn't be living today where no one has a home because of what they look like. Valuing life is so important to this. It's not an unconscious thing. All of them are based on decisions that you make, and if we make the wrong decision, as I say at Grenfell, we ultimately pay with our lives. So solidarity.